Hello and welcome everybody to another edition of the Saturdays for the Byzantines podcast. My name is Professor Wren. I'm your host. If you found this video, please make sure to give it a like, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and then hit the notification bell so you never miss another episode. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Google Play, please make sure to give us a follow. And especially if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please give us a 5-star review. And today, I wanted to talk about an interesting topic, one where I actually learned something new, something I didn't know about some of the things that we talk about here on this channel, which is fairly unusual. I'm fairly well versed in this, but this one even was new to me. So learn something new every day. And this is the church heresy, another heresy here of Miaphysitism. You may be thinking, doesn't that sound a lot like monophysitism? Well, it does, especially because they have very similar meaning. So the term Miaphysitism comes from two Greek words, mia meaning one, and physis meaning substance or nature, which is, if you remember back, you can go back and watch our video on monophysitism, is a very similar thing. Monophysitism said that Jesus had one nature, that the second person of the Trinity came down to earth, had one nature, and that it was a divine nature, that Jesus did not have a human nature. It's sort of similar to Nestorianism, which kind of said the opposite, that Jesus was born at least only with a human nature because he was born of a human woman, and so therefore he couldn't have had a divine nature when he was born. However, Miaphysitism is a little different. Miaphysitism, and it's interesting because there are some people who will say that Miaphysitism and monophysitism are essentially the same thing, and you can use the terms interchangeably. However, there are some Miaphysites who do not want to be lumped in with the monophysites, and I can't understand why, because there is a difference here, which we'll talk about here in a second. And so what the Miaphysites believe is that essentially the human nature and the divine nature came together as one nature in the person of Jesus Christ, the second person of the Trinity. Now, this is different from saying what the monophysites said, which was that Jesus had one nature and it was just human, or, well, that was the Nestorians, and I believe they said the Nestorians believed that Jesus became divine later on, or picked up some divine qualities later on. But the monophysites especially believed that Jesus had only a divine nature, no human nature. Now, this is different from what the Miaphysites believe. Again, the Miaphysites believe that you have a human nature and a divine nature which come together and merge into one nature in the second person of the Trinity. Now, on the opposite side of this debate, the Catholics and the Orthodox, now at this point in time, the Eastern Orthodox and the Roman Catholics had not split yet. So you could call it the Catholic Church, or you could call it just the Orthodox Church. They believed that there were two separate distinct natures in the one person of Christ, the second person of the Trinity. Two distinct and separate, though both present in the same person, one divine nature and one human nature. I always tell students when I teach this, I say, think about it as Jesus has two pies. He has one full human pie and one full divine pie. And he's just so great that he gets two pies, as opposed to the rest of us who get one only human pie. And I think that the Miaphysite position does get much closer to the truth of this, but I have a hard time reconciling the idea that in combining the human and the divine nature, that you don't lose a little bit from either one of them. I think it would be, it doesn't make sense to me that you can have one nature that is both human and divine. I think it makes more sense to say that there are two separate natures, both coexisting in the second person. Because I think if you just have the one nature, I think there would be aspects of the human and the divine natures that might not be present. Although, maybe a counter argument from Miaphysite might be, all things are possible with God, and he doesn't have to operate by our methods of logic and reasoning. I could see that, but as I've thought about this over the last couple of days, I can't. I'm not persuaded by it. And even this was, I believe, in the late 1990s, there was a statement put out by the Coptic Metropolitan Bishop of Damietta, which is in Egypt, where he says that Miaphysites believe in a united human divine nature, not one nature. Which, I mean, they do believe in one nature, but I think what he's saying here is not one human or one divine nature. Again, it's the united human and divine nature. And then the counter to this, of course, would be Diophysitism, which is just dio meaning two, and then physis again, meaning substance or nature. And this schism, the split for this occurred after the 451 Council of Chalcedon, which re-emphasized the teaching from the Council of Ephesus, which condemned monophysitism, but you can kind of see how monophysitism and Miaphysitism kind of spring up from the same roots. And then today, in the world today, we see these. So you might be wondering. This does cause a split in the Eastern Orthodox tradition, splitting them between one church, which is called the Eastern Orthodox Church, and another church, which is called the Oriental Orthodox Church. Now, these churches are not in communion with each other. If you are Eastern Orthodox, you cannot go receive sacraments at an Oriental Orthodox Church, and the same is true vice versa. Although, as time has gone on, there are some exceptions to that statement. There are some cases where Oriental Orthodox and Eastern Orthodox churches have some degree of intercommunion. And so you might be wondering, well, what are these Oriental Orthodox churches? Well, because I honestly had not heard about this. I'd seen the term come up a couple times, but I never researched it to the point where I realized they're completely separate, like a split off, a splintering of the Eastern Orthodox tradition. And so these churches would be, I think I have, let's see, 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, I have 6 written down here. So we have the Coptic Orthodox Church of Alexandria, the Syriac Orthodox Church of Antioch, the Armenian Apostolic Church, the Malankara Orthodox Syrians. So you see here, Syria is split up in between Lord knows how many churches. I mean, there's these Oriental Orthodox churches, you have Eastern Orthodox churches, you have Eastern Catholic churches coming in the forms of the Malachite and Melkite Rite Catholics. I've been to a Melkite, or sorry, no, not the Malachite and Melkite, the Melkites and the Maronites, excuse me, it's the Melkites and the Maronites. I've been to a Melkite Rite Mass a couple of times. It's pretty awesome. And then the Oriental Orthodox, they also have the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church, as well as the Eritrean Orthodox Tewahedo Church. Now, conversely, for the Eastern Orthodox, and sometimes the Eastern Orthodox are just referred to as the Orthodox, and then sometimes the Oriental Orthodox are referred to as just the Orientals. Apparently, they don't like that because the Oriental Orthodox view themselves as the Orthodox Church, and I guess leaving the word Orthodox out of their title gets some of them hot and bothered. Which, I mean, I can understand if you're under the impression that you are the real Orthodox ones in the group, or that there was no split to begin with. But you always end up in these weird situations with churches that have splintered and are attempting to reunify, where you have some people who want to reunify. You'll have, essentially, there's like 3 groups. There's people who acknowledge that there was a splintering and want to reunify, a group of people who acknowledge that there was a splintering and don't want to reunify, and then there's a group of people who don't even acknowledge that there was a splintering and think that they're still part of the church to begin with. Which you see in the Western Catholic world, this is, I would say, best exhibited by the issue with the Society of St. Pius X, where you'll see some people in the Society of St. Pius X say that, yes, there was a split between the SSPX and the Catholic Church, and they want to get back into communion with the Roman Catholic Church. There's other SSPX people who say, yes, that there was a split, and they don't want to come back into communion because they think that the Catholic Church is lost, and that they're the only true, they're continuing the true Roman Catholicism, which I don't believe myself, but that's what they say. And then there are some people who say that there was the SSPX was never excommunicated to begin with. They've been in communion this whole time. But anyway, the Eastern Orthodox churches, you have the Ecumenical Patriarchate of Constantinople. Then you have the Patriarchates of Alexandria, Antioch, and Jerusalem. So we see there in Antioch, there's another church in Syria. Then you have the Russian Orthodox Church, the Serbian Orthodox Church, the Bulgarian Orthodox Church, the Romanian Orthodox Church, the Gregorian Orthodox Church, the Church of Cyprus, the Church of Greece, the Orthodox Church of Albania, the Polish Orthodox Church, the Orthodox Church of the Czech lands and Slovakia, and then some Orthodox churches also recognize an Orthodox Church in Ukraine and an Orthodox Church in the United States. However, some of the Eastern Orthodox churches recognize those two, some of them don't. Personally, I come from a somewhat small town in Pennsylvania, and there are a lot of Eastern European, as well as we have a large Lebanese population, and not so much here, but a lot of we have a Maronite church in town, which is due to a lot of the Lebanese immigrants. And then we do have a Melkite Syrian church. However, I don't think our Syrian population is quite as big as our Lebanese, but maybe so. I'm not sure if there are a lot of Syrians who are Melkites, or I mean Lebanese people who are Melkites. But a number of these churches we would have found in town. There was certainly, we had Russian Orthodox, we had some the Constantinople Greek Orthodox. Even I remember when I did student teaching, on the drive to the school where I was teaching at, I remember there was a church, and I want to say it looked abandoned, but I want to say that you could see writing like above the door that said it was a Coptic Orthodox church. I would have to drive over there again and like stop the car, get out of the car, and take a closer look, because I would always like try to glance at it as I was driving, but I would never you couldn't get like a really good look because the lettering had faded and all that. But it would be interesting to see if one of those churches was in town as well. But a bit of a shorter video, I think, than usual. I don't really have a timer up in front of me, so I can't tell for sure. But if you've made it this far in the video, please make sure to give it a like, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and hit the notification bell so you never miss another episode. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, or Spotify, please make sure to give us a follow there, as well as a 5-star review. I do apologize if my voice sounds a little different. I'm a bit congested. I don't wonder if I'm coming down with a little bit of a cold. Hopefully not. But regardless, that is all I have for you today, and I'll see y'all next time.